Hi, everybody. My name is Christian Alberga. I'm a senior at Williams College. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Williams Summit. Today, we'll be speaking with Matt Silver, class of 2001, who is the CEO and founder of Cambrian Innovation. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
And so we would just love to hear a little bit about your, experience at Williams and, just broadly your journey to then becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. Okay, that's a broad question. At Williams, I think I had the classic liberal arts experience. I did a degree in astrophysics and a degree in art history, studied abroad, and played a little sports, played some soccer. Overall, it was a great experience. Miss it sometimes. It was nice to get to a bigger, city after Williams, but other than that, no, it was a terrific experience. And then your question, what was the next question?
Well, I would just love to know the path from graduating Williams and then, your time at MIT all the way up to you founding Cambrian Innovation. Just walk us through that path.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, I took a bit of a winding path. I mean, I took to heart trying to do something that was, I would find interesting rather than, something that sounded good. I was interested in aerospace and sort of space exploration. It just was an interest of mine. So I ended up studying that for a little bit. I went to Europe and studied at a school in Strasbourg and then ended up at the Canadian Space Agency doing a project that was kind of wild. We were building a greenhouse up on Devon Island in the Arctic. And the idea was it was like a test bed for what they called autonomous plant growth technology. So putting a greenhouse on Mars was the idea. That could you grow the plants from remotely. So built that up on the Arctic, and it was a lot of fun. It was cool. And then went to MIT, and I was lucky to get in. Jay Pasakoff at Williams helped me with a recommendation, and some of the folks he knew over there, and it was really helpful. And I did a program in what's called technology and policy. It was a master's degree, and then they allowed you to do kind of a second degree in engineering as part of that. So I did aerospace engineering and ended up with a PhD as well, in part because I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I was done with the master's. And during that time, MIT is a great environment. I'd recommend it to folks if they're interested. There's a lot of multidisciplinary things going on. It's great for people from Williams, that like that kind of thing. And there's a lot of people that start companies out of it, as everybody probably well knows. Places like MIT, Harvard, Stanford, any university really these days, people are looking to start companies out of the IP that's coming out of those schools. And so I was introduced by a friend of mine who was in the biotech program to a technology that was basically, it was a really cool, interesting process that just seemed kind of like science fiction. It was microbes that actually had electrical properties. And for those of you who know, the Boston area is very known for biotech. And so there's a lot of companies that develop innovations in biotech with application to pharmaceuticals. And what people had been talking about at MIT when I was there is that this is just going to expand across all sectors of the economy. It's going to be, there's going to be really big applications of what's called synthetic biology and genetic engineering in other parts of the economy. So I was sort of interested in, can this technology be applied outside of pharmaceuticals, say, in areas like water and energy and some basic resources. And we ended up getting a grant from NASA, actually, with the help of one of my advisors to look at it. So we started the company really around applied research and development around this new biological process with a grant from NASA. Really lucky to get that, and we're really happy to get it. And we kind of built the company up from there. The process worked with application to treating water and generating energy. We looked at the markets where it could be applied and saw that the what's called the distributed industrial market for water treatment was a big market, growing really quickly, and also really in need of cleanup. It's an significant environmental issue. And so technologies that could recover things like energy from water would have huge applications. So that's how we got the company started after a couple of years, and that was now 10 years ago. So fast forward now, we've scaled the technology. We've actually expanded what we're offering folks, and we're helping customers and industrial manufacturers across the world treat and reuse water while generating energy from it. And we've put in place a new business model in the market, taking a page from the solar industry, where they sold what were called power purchase agreements. We're doing that in the water market. So we've got, you can think of us kind of like the Sunrun of water. And for those of you familiar with Sunrun and SunEdison, some of these companies, and what's really cool about it is it's not an area people think about a lot. I didn't know much about water before getting into it, but it's hugely important to everything that we do. And there are huge environmental impacts from what we're doing. Every plant that we install, we estimate every dollar spent on one of our plants is actually about 3 times the carbon impact as an equivalent dollar spent on solar panel, for example. And that's for a whole host of reasons I get to. But we're also eliminating pollution. We're making clean water sources available. So it feels good to be working in it. We have 22 plants now across the world. We're working with some really great companies like AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Sapporo. We're some really great companies that we're lucky to be working with.
That's awesome. And I think we're going to jump into a few of the different things you mentioned.
Sure.
But could you just give like a background on how the exact science works of the innovation that Cambrian Innovation does, and how the process works?
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about that. And now you should stop me if I'm getting into too much detail. But at a high level, the area is biological processing, where you're basically using microbes, bacteria, to carry out processes for you. In our case, what they're doing is they're eating pollution, and as a byproduct of eating the pollution, they're emitting either electricity or methane gas. And we put that together with other processes to basically go from polluted water to potable quality water at the end of the day. So we break down the pollution, the bacteria grow, they produce things that we can use, and then we get clean water out the other end. That was
definitely
yeah.
I think Div 2 majors like myself can definitely understand that. And so then just looking into a little bit about the entrepreneurial process. So most students are generally interested or know the most about entrepreneurship relating to software. And so if you could speak about like some of the challenges that might be unique to creating an actual physical product as an entrepreneur, and how that process might differ.
That's a really great question, and I could probably talk for an hour in answering that question, but I'll try to get kind of to the point. It is totally different, and that was proven out in part by, about 10 years ago, there was a big boom in clean tech. They're calling it something different now, climate tech. But in clean tech, there was a big boom. There was hundreds of millions of dollars invested in a lot of companies, with the theory that we could scale them and get them into the market like we could solar, like we could software companies. And none of that worked. So, and the reason is because it just takes a little bit more time. The business models are different. You have to prove the technology quite often first, and then you have to prove that it can, be purchased in the market. And the types of capital that are needed for that, the types of funding and investment, are a little bit different as well. So you need to think about things like piloting and proving out the technology. You need to think of the dynamics of your business model. How do companies purchase stuff in the energy, water, chemicals, in those industries that are generally associated with, climate tech or oil, gas, all these, it's a very different way of buying stuff. So whether it's proving the technology or understanding how people buy stuff, or the time scales it takes to do that, all of that is going to change. You're going to have to think about each step, And you also have to think about what your financing partners are. So if you're starting a software company, go to Silicon Valley or Boston or Austin or wherever, and raise your Series A and develop your product and run with it. If you're developing a little bit of a different hardware tech product, it's a different process, and think more about the investors that focus on that, and be really clear about kind of the market and the business model that you're going to be going after. And I'll say one last thing, which is there are a number of companies now that are focused on helping entrepreneurs in this area of climate tech, clean tech, separate from software or pharmaceuticals, say. For example, in the Boston area where I am, there's a group called Greentown Labs. Some friends of mine started that about a while ago now, but they're very successful at helping accelerate the scaling of some of these solutions. At MIT, there's something called The Engine, which I would look into. That's a venture capital, but also has like lab space and is connected with university. In Berkeley, there's Cyclotron Road. So there's and we've worked with a group called Emerson Accelerator that's focused on climate type technology. So there's a lot of resources out there to help people understand how to develop and innovate in these quote unquote harder tech parts of the market.
Yeah, that's great. And could you go into specifically on Cambrian Innovation, what the capital raising process looks like? You mentioned you got the grant from NASA, but just in your company's history, where did you raise capital from?
Yeah, I think the question is, where did we not raise capital from? That'll be a shorter answer. But we did start off with grants, and we were lucky to get about $10 million in grants initially to build out the product. From there, we raised some capital, not with a venture capital group, but with what's called a family office. So this is a lot of high net worth individuals have offices that make direct investments. They tend to be a little bit more patient with their capital and a little bit more strategic. And we were lucky to work with a family office to raise our first round of capital in what's called the Series A. From there, we actually took on a little debt because we started to sell technology. So we worked with it's not quite a venture debt group for those that are familiar with that term, but a little bit more of a growth debt. And I could get into what the difference is there, but with a group in the Boston area that's been very helpful, and that enabled us to grow the value of the business without selling the equity. It's a little riskier, but we did that. And then we raised a larger amount of capital with a group called Emerson Collective. So that's the Jobs family out in Silicon Valley, and they led a B round into the company. And then since then, we actually put together, to my point earlier on business model and on types of capital, what we do at Cambrian is we actually offer our technology as a service to people that want it, meaning they don't have to buy our equipment, they can just buy clean water or clean energy. To do that, we need capital to finance the plants. And we worked with a project finance company, it's a private equity group, to put together a pool of capital for us to draw down from. So all in all, we've raised a little over $60 million if you include the grants. So it's a decent amount of money by some standards. By others, we've gone pretty far on that cash.
Yeah, and so how long was it between when the Cambrian Innovation was first officially founded and when you got your first dollar of revenue?
Well, I would count, I'm going to give you so I would count the grants as revenue. In the beginning, we were doing applied R&D, so that would be 6 months. But in terms of the product revenue, which I think is your real question, it was from the time that we decided to go after a specific product in the market and bring it into the market. That was about 2010, and the first dollar of revenue was 2015. So it was 5 years of scaling the technology through pilots, larger pilots, an industrial installation in California, and that was subsidized by grants and investors at that point to see if it would work. once it worked, then we sold. So it was about 5 years, which is it might sound like a long time, a lot of effort. And in some ways it was, but in other ways that's very fast when you're talking about a fundamentally new process for industry, because it takes some time to prove those out.
Yeah. And I think it would be helpful if you explain a little how your water energy purchase agreement works, because it is a really innovative, way of doing business. And why do you decide to use that model?
Yeah, thank you. The way it works from a customer's perspective is pretty simple. So we're selling to companies that are manufacturing goods, largely in food and beverage, but also we've got a project in biofuels, a project in other, a lot of other areas. But so if you think of yourself as like a brewery, let's say, you're manufacturing beer, and as a byproduct of manufacturing, you've got tens of thousands up to hundreds of thousands of gallons of wastewater that you're producing. That's usually costing you a lot of money. You can buy equipment to install and operate on your own, and then you've got to know how it works. You've got to design it correctly. You've got to make sure you're operating it correctly. You've got to pay all of the maintenance, all of that stuff. And if it doesn't work, you have to call people in to fix it. And it's not really what you do for your business, right? So what we do with the water energy purchase agreement is very similar to what's called a power purchase agreement in the energy industry, where we will just finance, own, install the system on your site. You give us the water, and then we'll charge you, we'll send you back clean water, and we'll charge you per gallon that we're sending back. And that price that we're charging you is actually less than the all-in cost of your water almost every time. Sometimes it's a little bit more, but you're still addressing, an environmental challenge or a compliance challenge. But usually you're saving from day one without any investment. So it's a long-term contract. It can be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And it's priced on a price per gallon.
So typically, do your clients, when they get back clean water, do they use it back in the process of whatever they manufacture, or is it then just used to be disposed of in an environmentally friendly way?
It depends on the client, and usually they're using it for some simple things that they need to do at the manufacturing plant. So these plants need to wash their floors. They have what are called cooling towers that have water in them. They have tanks that they use that they have to rinse. And so all of that stuff, it needs high quality water, but it doesn't need to be, city water. So they're using it for, secondary processes. No one really uses it in core products yet, but it's a huge trend in general, the area of reusing water on site and locally, because water prices are going up and water tables are falling.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that Cambrian Innovation is 10 years old now. So how are you thinking about growth in the future, both in the pace that you're raising capital and how quickly you're trying to, get new clients, expand into new, expanding by producing more facilities?
Yeah, we're seeing significant opportunities for growth. I mentioned that we've got plants all over the world now, great anchor customers. And what we're seeing is the industry shifting. We're excited to have been the first to put in place this water energy purchase agreement in the distributed water sector. There are companies that have done similar things, but not exactly like we're doing it. And we're seeing a number of folks that are doing the same thing now and putting forward service-focused agreements. And so procurement of water technology is shifting, and we're one of the leaders in it. And there's huge opportunities for us. There's just in North America, there's 25,000 plants that could use our technology. You put that together, and it's both the environmental impact and the revenue potential is enormous. So we're excited about where we are and how we're accelerating.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So taking a step back from the actual technical parts of the business, I'm just wondering if there's been any moments of uncertainty or critical junctures where you felt that you might have failed, and if so, how did you overcome it?
Never, not one. Just been smooth sailing since the start of the company. When you start a company, you've got to imagine that you're going to face a lot of challenges. It's not going to be easy. Nobody gives anything to you. So I would say that one of the things I'm proud of is, we've got a great team. We've have a determined team, and it's hard to break into a new market, particularly a conservative market like industrial markets that are most in need of innovation, by the way. And so, yes, there has been a lot of times when we've hit, challenges from any number of areas, whether it's the technology wasn't quite right in some way, or we put the technology in place at a customer site and we didn't design it quite right the first time, so we had to fix it. Or we've got a bunch of cash coming in along certain milestones, and then something happened to the company that was paying us, so we had to work out how we're going to solve that. Or, I won't even get into the rest of it, but there's a whole lot of other things that can happen. So you need a strong stomach to make it through those times, and you need confidence, and you just need to figure it out. I could probably go into more detail if you'd like, but the short answer is absolutely. There's a lot of gut check moments.
Okay, so how do you think about risk taking then? And do you have any kind of systems you manage internally, both from your own personal perspective, but also from the business perspective?
The way I happen to think about risk taking is that the most strategic way to develop a business is to make sure, let me put it this way. There's for those of you familiar with the book by Sun Tzu, The Art of War, there's a quote in that I always liked, which is that the best general never fights a battle he might lose. And what that means is, it doesn't mean you don't take risks, because you're always taking risks, but you're sure to take them in a way in which you're going to be on the best footing. And so you think clearly about alternatives, and you have a, quote unquote, plan A, plan B, and all that. But you're also careful to really manage the downside, and so that's how I've approached it. There's other ways to do it. Some people, you've got to, you have to do that. And to start a business, you already have to be in a market where the upside is huge. Let me put it that way. So you want to be focused on the growth and the opportunity, but you do have to think about the downside risks and be really clear about listing them out and how you're going to address them, and all of that. And that's anything from cash to people to customers to any number of things that can disrupt a business.
Okay, and so then what's been your proudest moment since founding Cambrian Innovation?
It's a good question. I think, in all honesty, the proudest moment was when one of the proudest moments was when our first industrial scale plant was lowered off a crane at a winery in Napa Valley. And it had been, as I mentioned, about 5 years of effort, 4.5 years of effort to get it to that point. And it was cool because we honestly knew very little to nothing about the industrial market at that point in time. And we just built something, so it's like, all right, well, let's see if it works now. And it was proud to see everybody we were working with coming together to get that thing in place and see if it worked. And, we learned a lot in the process. We didn't do everything perfectly, but, we tried to learn from where we could from that project and then move on. So yeah, that was a proud moment.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about myself, especially as a young kid. When I would think of what an inventor is, I would think of someone like you who's actually just making stuff out of just starting a company like that. And I think many students at Williams, it might be hard from our perspective to see how you can get from doing a liberal arts degree to going somewhere where you're actually building a brand new innovative product. So I was just wondering, what impact do you feel like your Williams career had? And, if in any way it has helped influence the success that you've had today?
Well, I drank the Kool-Aid at Williams. I mean, I really did believe in the learn to learn concept. And the idea that if, as long as you know how to read and write and to take a complex situation and simplify it, that's valuable. And I'll tell you that, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to William's audience, but that is by and far the most important thing right now, and much more valuable than the technical stuff I did later at MIT, for example. That was good domain knowledge. I don't use any of it right now. I use the rest of it, which is the ability to take a complex, messy situation and figure out a thesis and a strategy around that you can execute on. You'd be surprised by how valuable that is and how in short supply it is. So in my view, it's really critical, the liberal arts background, to innovating in any industry. And then you've got to find out who can help you once you've figured out what it is you need to do, which is required, that the education helps with. Then you can find out who can help you do it. And so that's another thing that's an important part of it. And part of that's teamwork, right? Learning how to work properly in a team, play on a sports team, whatever it is. It's all about teamwork to actually build something.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of students here who are interested in climate change and clean anything more broadly. And I feel like a lot of students, from our perspective, we see a lot of the policy side, being a liberal arts school, and we see a lot of the activism side. I just wanted to know, from your perspective, what trends do you see in clean tech that might be beyond just solar, wind, and hydroelectricity that we kind of just see on the news? What trends do you think that Williams students who are interested in clean energy, clean tech, should be trying to learn more about or look towards?
Yeah, I could list out a couple, and there's different ways to cut it. I mean, there's the type of technology, like you said, solar, wind, and all of that. And if I was looking at it from that angle, it's obviously batteries are extremely important area. So whether it's like grid storage, or for the electricity market, or batteries for cars, or anything, there's a lot of innovation going on in batteries right now. The software to operate and regulate those things, it's really a good thing to get into the software area in clean tech if you can, because it just can generate a lot of value. So I would look at that. People are talking about hydrogen again right now. They talked about it about 10 years ago. And I think we're looking at it more seriously as a real potential for energy storage. And there's some opportunities there, both in the technology and in sort of the business around hydrogen. So I would look at that. Geothermal seems to be an area that's gaining traction as well. So those are some technology domains or technologies that you could think about. And then, I would say separately that where things have gone, and I think Cambrian's part of this trend, but is in the area of infrastructure as a service. And it's not necessarily, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but by turning distributed infrastructure into services, like we're doing with the WIPA, or like the PPA did, you actually can change the way people procure fundamental resources and actually lead to improved sustainability outcomes for a whole host of reasons. So there's a lot of investment companies that have started looking at distributed infrastructure as a service, and those would be interesting to work at as well.
Okay. This is a question that's a little bit more personal. It just came to mind when you mentioned that. And are you familiar with the company Pipe? It's like a new form of fundraising where basically you can sell your recurring revenue like securitized, and basically just get all that money now for investment.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Pipe particularly, but the idea of somebody buying a future revenue stream at a discount is out there, and there's companies that do that for projects. There is innovation going on in distributed project finance. I mean, and it's interesting. I find it really interesting. There's, for example, can you tokenize or a revenue stream for a project, for a solar project, for a wind project? Can there's some concepts there around using cryptocurrency or using blockchain in the solar market or otherwise. So there's some cool innovation going on around the financing and the revenue part of it. I put Pipe in a subset of that, and if you can make it easier to buy a revenue stream, that's great. The idea of buying a future revenue stream, that's been out there.
Okay, cool. And before I get to my last question, I just wanted to give this opportunity. If there's anything you feel like, we should touch on that we haven't, we can definitely jump into that.
I don't. I mean, I will just say one thing, which is that it's always difficult to take a leap to start something. And I think that's probably for folks that are interested in entrepreneurship in this area, the question might be, how do I get started? And I would say two things to that. One is you can obviously always intern or join a company. And once you're there, figure out what's interesting and not. So don't feel like you're going to get pigeonholed if you join in one area, but you have skills in another. That was always a concern I had. But I think if you go to a smaller company, they're going to need you in a lot of different areas. So you can just jump in and get experience that way. The other thing is you can just start something. And, when you start something, it'll evolve and change. And you just have to bank on the fact that you're going to learn as you go. And people will help you that were unexpected. So sometimes the best thing to do is just to take a leap and figure it out.
Yeah, and so my last question is going to be if you had any piece of advice for a Williams student, which sounds like that fit perfectly. Yeah. But I think what you just said, it kind of reminded me of when I came into Williams, I did not think I could be an entrepreneur. I don't think I had what it takes. It just seems like the risk was too much. And I'm just wondering if you ever felt, when you were coming to Williams, did you feel like you could become an entrepreneur, and how you got to the point where you believe like I can be an entrepreneur?
Well, I did, and I think I was part of the entrepreneurship club, and I started something while at Williams. It was called, well, I won't get into what it was, but it was a software-based thing. So I think to actually start something, you have to be a little bit foolish enough to think that it will actually succeed despite all the risks. Most people that are entrepreneurs are pretty sure they're going to succeed, even if other people haven't, even though the odds are you won't. I guess I did kind of have that hubris in a way that I could start something, but ultimately, the thing about entrepreneurship is twofold. Really, it's about learning, and as long as you take a setback as something to learn from, then you're an entrepreneur. You're building something, and so it really is look at it as a learning process rather than a set. We've hit hundreds of little failures, thousands of them as we go through, and we go one direction, doesn't work, and we go another direction. So it's about what you're trying to accomplish and being willing to kind of fail along the way to success. I think is an important way to look at it and to get lessons learned as quickly as possible. So yeah, I think it can come in different flavors.
Well, I think that is an awesome point for us to end on. We really appreciate you taking the time, Matt. This was definitely a super interesting discussion, and thank you again for connecting with the Williams students.
Well, thank you very much for reaching out to me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing. It's good to see you again.